In today's episode, Robin Waite walks us through how he used one single collaborative event, one podcast episode that has generated over 3,000 leads and over $250,000 worth of work. So stick around. If you want to build a legitimate, profitable online business without shiny objects, without the hypey gimmicks, and without the stress and overwhelm, if you want to make more money without having to be present online all day, every day, pumping out content that nobody sees and hustling DMs to generate leads and sales, then this is the place for you. Welcome to the Digital Trailblazer podcast, your online business university, where you'll learn how ordinary people start from ground zero with no influence, no email list or audience to sell to, and no business or marketing experience, and go from working 9-to-5 jobs to building successful 6- and 7-figure online businesses and all the steps in between. Learn the strategies that worked and what didn't. Learn the mistakes that they made and how to avoid them, and then learn their plans for scaling their businesses and taking things to the next level. All so that you can build your business faster and easier and make more money without sacrificing the things that are important to you in your life. I'm your host, Leah Ray Getz, and with me is my husband, Todd. Now, let's get to it with today's guest. Welcome, Digital Trailblazers, and welcome, Robin. We are super excited to have you with us today.
Oh, Leah, I can't wait to dig into the interview. I'm really excited. Thank you.
Yes, you're so welcome. So collaborations, I'll be honest, we hear about this all the time. Like people think it's this magic wand that they can wave and it's going to magically fix everything. The reality is I've seen a lot of people just kind of stuck in the getting ready to get ready, or maybe they've made some outreaches, but it hasn't really gone anywhere. Or they've done some really small podcasts that didn't have audiences and they didn't see anything come from it. So how do you actually do this collaborative thing well and make sure it's actually going to produce the kind of outcome that you're looking for?
Yeah, you touched on something which is really key there, Leah, is that there are some common mistakes which people make that essentially prevent them from making partnerships really work well for them. And it's a really simple mindset thing. So I think a lot of business owners out there, without being, well, I'm going to be blunt, they come at their marketing and sort of lead generation from a bit more of a desperate place, i.e. they need to get clients like fairly quickly. And so when they're reaching out to people, whether it's directly to prospects or to potential partners, so a lot of people come at it from a position of, what's in it for me versus kind of what's in it for the person they're doing the partnership with. And what we're really looking for is that elusive triple win where everybody benefits, not just yourself, but also the partner and also their audience as well. One of the other things which is going on is that where there's this sense of I need clients now, what really makes partnerships, stick together is time. It just takes time to build relationships with your prospective partners. And we're talking here months, if not potentially years, to go through the 5 steps, which, I've leveraged to build some really amazing partnerships during my career. I've probably spent sort of, anywhere from 6 months up to 3 years working with those partners before anything has actually come to fruition. The 5 steps themselves are super simple. They're really easy to follow in principle, but you've just got to have the tenacity and the patience just to follow through with it. Sure, like anything, sometimes those partnerships just don't pay off, and then you have to know when is the right time to sort of get out and focus on your next potential partnership. So one of the things which I noticed, in fact, I tell you what might be useful is if I rewind the clock a little bit and maybe talk about why I ended up shifting into the partnership model more so than anything else in my business. I've been in business for about 20 years now. I ran a marketing agency for about 12 of those years and then sold that. And then that's where I ended up stepping into mentoring. So I've probably been coaching now for about 8 years. But 2 years ago, I just reached a point where I was just really quite tired and exhausted by the traditional way of marketing, what people, the experts and gurus tell you to do these days, which is, to do the short and long form video, to get onto social media and get onto LinkedIn and get into people's DMs, do Twitter and Facebook and do advertising. It's really exhausting, even just kind of like talking through that list of stuff, right? And at the end of 2022, I was just burnt out by doing what everybody else was doing. I mean, I had my own unique take on it with my marketing assets that I've created and things like that. But I was finding that I was spending less and less time doing the thing which I love, which is coaching, and more time doing marketing activities and just feeling tired. So January last year rolled around and I was like, right, I just scrapped all of my marketing. It was from a place of like experience. So going back to 2004 and I registered my first business. In the UK, there was only about 500,000 registered small businesses. Fast forward to today, and there's now 6 million registered small businesses. That's just in the UK. So 10 times the number of businesses. So, which means that I'm competing in this like massively oversaturated market for a start, which is then even more exaggerated by the fact we have this wonderful thing called the internet, the global marketplace world at your fingertips that you can tap into. So you're not just competing against 10 times the number of businesses in your local sort of geographical area, but like worldwide. And plus all of the different social medias. So I thought there has to be a better way to get my name out there, build my personal brand. And so I just got and this is the first step, I just got really intentional about what it was that I wanted to do, who I wanted to hang out with, and also in terms of like the impact which I wanted to create, what sort of numbers, what scale did I want that to happen at? And we're talking, tens of thousands of people. That's who I wanted to reach with my message about sort of business. Cause, I think that business advice should be democratized, that everybody should have the availability of a coach and good quality business advice for free, not for anything. But I was like, so how do I get that message out? If I'm struggling to build my audiences the traditional way, how do I actually get my message out to a large number of people? I realized there's other amazing creators out there who have already built these audiences. They've done the work. They've built those audiences of 100,000 or 1 million people or even more than that. It's like, okay, so how do I tap into those? And then I looked at my existing network. I've been in business 18 years, so I've got a really broad network. I realized that there were some people in there who had these audiences who were just really fun, cool people that I vibed with. And I was like, I just want to hang out with them. I think if I hang out with them, I could probably learn something. So I wrote down a list of 10 people, and intentionally like 10 people I was going to make an effort to do more work with, whatever that looked like. Not based on sales, not based on trying to get leads or money or anything like that. It was just, I'll hang out with these people and see what happens. And you have to bear in mind, this is 18 months ago. I hadn't figured out the 5 steps at that point. I was just kind of piecing it together making it up as I went along at that particular point. So step 1, hyper intentional. Make a list of 10 people who are cool people you vibe with, similar identity to you, and see if you can hang out with them. And then that led me on to the second thing. I was like, well, I'm kind of already hanging out with these people, mostly online, and we go to virtual events together and things like that. And I got a bit lazy. I wasn't getting out in my little studio here in southwest of England. I was, I'm an hour and a half away from London. I was like, I'm not actually getting out that much. So, and this led me on to step 2. Put yourself in the same room as these people, this list of 10 people that you want to partner up with physically. Like if they're putting on an event, go to that event. And a little side note to that is, don't just show up to those events and be a bit of a passenger. Like go and sit in the front row and make sure that, you're there when they're on stage speaking. They eyeball you. When they finish their talk, you can go up, you can shake the hand, have a selfie with them, and properly catch up with them. And, there's no hidden agenda here. It's just to kind of build that relationship. And I always tell people now, there's that cliched phrase, a picture paints 1,000 words. Well, going and meeting somebody and shaking a hand and looking into their whites of their eyes, that's like as powerful as one social media post or like sharing something on their socials or whatever it might be. So get in the same room, make sure you're sat in the front room. Don't just be front row. Don't be a passenger. The third step then is, again, it's like really obvious when you start to break it down. It's harder in practice, but the third step is then to be helpful, add value in some way, shape or form. So there's a couple of examples, and by all means, I know I'm burning through the 5 steps. If you want to interrupt me and go into any of the steps in more detail, please do ask. But step number 3 was be helpful. And there's 2 examples of this. So my friend Ali Abdal, spoiler alert, that's the podcast I referenced. He's got 6 million subscribers on YouTube, but I noticed that I went to one of his events and there was about 500 or 600 people coming to the event that one evening. And most of them looked lost. They didn't know where to go or where the event was, within the venue or things like that. So I put my stuff down on the floor. I stood by the entrance and I just started greeting people and saying, "Oh, cloakroom's that way, refreshments are that way, and we're getting going in about 10 minutes. The auditorium's over there." And Ali's manager came up to me and said, "Hey, Rob, thanks, but why are you doing this?" And I was like, "Well, everybody looked lost. I just thought I'd help out." And then after that, we got into a conversation, and Angus, who's his general manager, said, "Robin, we should catch up afterwards and just have a conversation." So it's like, he noticed me just because I got outside my comfort zone a little bit and just was helpful, added value. And same with, there's another amazing creator, a guy called Chris Doe, who has a channel called The Future. He works a lot with creators, and he came to London for another event. his whole premise is like, he creates these amazing videos where he coaches people live with a whiteboard session, and they film it and it goes on. But I noticed we started the session, nobody had a camera, nobody had a microphone. And since I started going to more events, I brought my camera gear and my little set of radio mics and stuff with me. I used to chuck them in my bag. I didn't have a camera, so I tapped somebody on the shoulder in front of me, and I said, because I could see he had a camera bag, I was like, get your DSLR out. Like, what? And I said, look, let's film this. Chris isn't filming this, let's film it. And I got my radio mic and I start walking around the room with this radio mic. Again, uninvited, nobody told me to do that. I was just like, I want to be helpful. Like, Chris needs this content for his channel. And sure enough, about an hour and a half into this workshop in front of 150 people, Chris stops everything. And he's like, hey, can we just thank that guy over there in the blue shirt, like with the microphone? That's Robin. He's got this amazing book. Like, please go and read it. And then he said, Robin, I've been meaning to get you on my podcast, but I haven't finished reading your book yet. I want to finish reading the book and then I'll get you on. So I was like, brilliant. Got a piece of acknowledgement just through being a bit fearless and a bit helpful. And there's a lot of things there that other people who are trying to build relationships, partnerships, that they'd be like, I couldn't possibly do that. It's a bit awkward. I couldn't possibly put myself out there. But it's just doing something a bit and the thing is, even if you look like a bit of an idiot, like, most people have forgotten about it by tomorrow because they're like super busy people, right? The other side of this as well. So that's step 3, be helpful, add value. Step 4 is then, and this is something which people forget, is like, they think that when they're starting out, I can go straight to like Steve Bartlett from Diary of a CEO and get on his podcast. No, Steve Bartlett's busy, right? He's flying all over the world. He's interviewing these remarkable people, going on TV and stuff like that. The chances of you getting like directly to somebody like him is like nil. It's just not going to happen, So step 4 is find your inside man or woman. Like, don't just focus on the person at the top of the food chain you want to get this partnership with. They've got a wonderful team and all of the attention's on like that person. So the moment you start paying attention to their team, they're like, oh, wow, somebody's noticed me. They're not focused on like the key person of influence or whatever it might be. And normally they're also not quite as busy either. They're more accessible. So you can start to build really strong relationships with them and start to get to know their team and see then how you can maybe work behind the scenes with their team. So again, focusing on Ali Abdaal. So one of the things which I did to start to build that partnership with him, a lot of his team as he grew the team were freelancers. So I'm like, that's my dream client, is working with sort of freelancers, coaches, consultants. I was like, let me coach your team. I'll do it for free. I just love working and hanging out with you guys. And what will be, will be. And it opened up some really great conversations. And obviously the key one, which I'm sure you're going to quiz me on, the 3,000 leads and how that came about. And so finding that inside person that you can actually start to build a really deep relationship with, who then at their team meetings, they say, oh, I met this really interesting guy, Robin. You should think about getting him on your podcast. And then the final step is, if those first 4 steps don't work, and normally that should get you the partnership which you want. But if they don't, then the final step is what I call a silver platter. It's like, just give them something of like massive value that otherwise they may not have either thought of or have access to. So a couple of examples of this are one which I've done, which is pay to play. So there's a dream speaking gig, which I've been trying to get into this speak at this conference for several years. And in the end, I was like, well, I'm just going to have to pay. I'm going to have to sponsor something at the event so that at least it opens the door up. And sure enough, it did. I sponsored it last year. I sponsored it this year. I've ended up being an associate coach on one of their programs because they do something similar to me. And then next year in June, I'm speaking at Atomicon, which I'm like pumped about. But it was because I actually put some money into, like, I supported their brand because I love what they do. Not to get the opportunity, but it was like to support what they're doing and lift them up. If you can bring like 2 amazing creators together, that's another great example of a silver platter. So Ali Abdaal with 6 million subscribers and Chris Do with 2.4 million subscribers. And they're both like super highly intellectual people, really smart guys. They'd have a great conversation. Selfishly, I would love to see the 2 guys have that conversation, but I'm sure a lot of other people would enjoy it from it, right? So finding a way to introduce people or to gift them a client, a big contract or something like that, or whatever it might be. Again, that opens up that conversation if the other ways of kind of building the relationship aren't working. So yeah, those are the 5 steps. Be intentional, be in the same room, be helpful and add value, find your inside person if you can't get straight to the person in charge, and then the silver platter.
Oh, I love that. So I think hopefully people are taking some notes on all of that. But I can definitely hear the whispers in some people's minds right now of the introverts who are a little freaked out, right? On kind of putting themselves out there and kind of going after this sort of thing. So what can you speak of just on the mindset piece of this and kind of putting yourself out there? Because everyone's fear of rejection is real. Like that's a big thing, no matter how most people have that at some level. So what can you speak to there to help people kind of get out of their heads and actually do these different pieces?
Yeah, that's such a great question, actually. So the first 12 years of my career running that agency, I was a humble web designer, and I enjoyed the fact that I could hide behind a screen and not speak to people. And ultimately, I was like the ultimate introvert, basically. So I knew when I started doing what I do now, and I saw other experts, coaches, creators, they were out there speaking at conferences and stuff like that. So I literally had to go from 0 to 60 and start doing it. In terms of like, if somebody is at that point where they're kind of struggling, one of the things which I've realized is, as I've gone through this process and started to meet more influential people using these 5 steps, when you actually get there and shake their hand and have a conversation with them, you realize actually they're just human beings. And in the business world, they're kind of trying to do the same thing as you. You might perceive that they're at a different level. The bank balances might be different. The deals which they do might be different or bigger. But ultimately, like what it comes down to is they're just human beings. And if you pick the right partners that you have that similar sort of vibe with, they're probably going to be just nice, down-to-earth, fun, humble human beings that even if you feel like a bit of an idiot or you feel a bit nervous about the thing, that they're going to lift you up when you come up and shake their hand. And that's something which I had to... There was one particular point. I went to a creator retreat, and I'm not a creator. I don't consider myself to be a creator. Probably there's a bit of imposter syndrome, I don't know. But there was 60 people in this room with probably combined like 150 million subscribers or followers between them. And then little old me with like my little YouTube channel and stuff. As I was looking around and then having conversations with these people, and then the speakers were coming up, just more and more and more, like one, they were just really awesome people, made me feel really comfortable, really at home, really like just everything was really wholesome about it. And I just all of a sudden had this massive insight. I was just like, they're just the same. They're exactly the same as me. They're all just trying to grow a business. They're doing it their own way. Hopefully, if you pick the right people, they'll lift you up. Like even if you do something a bit dumb, I always say to people as well, like in business, there's only 2 things that can ever go wrong. It's not like we're walking down to the river on the plains of Africa and can literally get eaten up by hippos and lions and stuff like that. We might lose a bit of money, or we might look a bit dumb, and like. The latter one, most people will literally have forgotten about it by tomorrow because life carries on, right? So, and also, if you don't put yourself out there, you're not going to get those opportunities. And I don't know about you, but I'm one of those people that I can't tolerate not knowing. I would rather know if I'm not going to make it. I would rather know if I'm going to make it. So whatever happens, I have to do something.
Yeah, I love that. And it actually reminds me of a lot. I even forgot. So back in the day, we got introduced to Pat Flynn, right? And honestly, he's become for us and for me, I love his stuff. I love his personality. I love his podcast. If his team is listening, he'd be amazing to have on the show. But he's kind of up there for me. And I had an opportunity at Vid Summit, our friend Daryl Eves event a few years back. And Pat Flynn, it was between a speaking or something, I went out to the side and there he was by himself. And I was like, oh my goodness, it's him. And I was so freaking nervous. I was quite nervous, and I'm not, like when I'm on my own show and if I'm in my world, I'm outgoing and confident. When I'm outside of that space, I'm kind of a different person. I'm more introverted. And so it really takes a lot for me to like work myself up to it. And I'm very grateful that I did. We didn't have the podcast back then. I was like, let me interview. I got a phone and okay, let's do this. And so I had my friend hold the phone, and I went up to him and I asked him if he would do it. And he was the most gracious person ever. And he was so kind, and he was so understanding and just really nice. And he was just a really normal person. And I'm so glad for that experience. We have great content. And I mean, Yeah, if they're annoying about, like, if they like blow you off, they're not someone you're going to want to do business with anyway. Like, if they have this chip on their shoulder that they're better than everyone else, who would want to have that as a partner in any way, right? Like, the people you actually want to partner with are going to be cool, normal people. Maybe they're more advanced in business than you, but they're still just people.
There's a little secret here, which I'll share with you, Leah, as well. There are people who've been cut from the list for that exact reason. So that list of 10 original people, a small number of them, which I've kind of, I won't name any names because it's not fair on them, but where I've started to sort of follow them online on social and things like that and start to kind of figure out what events they're doing and whether there's a good fit or not. And then for whatever reason, you just see there's no alignment there. But that's really hard, knowing when to like cut them from the list, like put the line through it and actually add somebody else onto there. But then it's quite exciting at that point, because then like, oh, I get to go and follow somebody else now and see what rabbit hole that takes me down. So you can make it quite fun as well. And I can guarantee too that Pat will remember that interaction with you 100%, like, because obviously clearly it meant something to him as well to be able to do that interview with you. So, at some point when you want to make that ask, or if you want to get him onto the podcast, if you haven't already, he will remember that. I can guarantee it.
So I'm curious about these 5 steps. Are these steps that you have to do in order of 1, 2, 3, and then 4, and then 5? Or is it like, could you, for example, like start a relationship with someone lower down in the organization and just focus on that one? Or how does this work?
Yeah, I mean, so the being intentional and picking that, who are my top 10 partners that I would love to do some work with, that obviously is always going to be the first step, because you've got to intentionally go out there and start following these people and figuring out. Essentially, you've got to be like a detective. You've got to follow the breadcrumb trail to get to that person and figure out where the alignment is. But yeah, you could probably swap the steps around, because it might be that their team are more accessible if they're not doing events, for example. So you may not physically be able to get in the room necessarily. Yeah, absolutely. You could swap the steps around for sure.
Okay. And then that list of 10 people, with you and with the people that you've worked with, how many of those 10 do you typically see people actually being able to do a collaboration with? Does it usually end up being just 1 or 2, or is it more? Or sometimes do you make a list of 10 and you strike out on all 10 and you got to create another 10? How does that go?
Out of my original list of 10, in 18 months, I've managed to create collaborations with 5 of them. And essentially, once you've built that partnership, then your intentionality can shift. So long as you remember to keep tabs with those initial 5 and you keep working on those partnerships, you could just add another, bump another 5 onto the bottom of the list and start sort of bringing them through as well. But that also gives you an idea about the timescales that it takes to develop some of these partnerships. We're talking 2 years to get my dream speaking engagement. In terms of the relationship with Ali Abdaal, and I'd love to go through the numbers with you sort of around that and the impact it had. So I actually met him for the first time 4 years ago, but it didn't start to accelerate until I kind of started to come up with this concept and invest more time into that partnership. So again, there was a good 18 months worth of investment that went into that relationship really before it started to come to fruition as well. There's kind of one key bit to it as well, actually, which I've missed off, which is quite important. There is like an inflection point where you've paid enough pounds or dollars into the meter every day into these relationships. And then you've got to make your ask. You've got to ask for what you want to get out of it. Take with Ali, for example, like it just ended up being right time, right place. I made the right level of it. If you ask for too much, you can blow it. If you don't ask for enough, you can blow it. So it's that like Goldilocks of getting that ask right and with all of the right sort of conditions going on around it. So with Ali, I'd helped out several of his team members, and then there was one guy, Joe, on his team. He just got so much value out of it, the conversation which we had together. And he said, "Robin, I want to give you something. I want to pay you. I want to whatever." And I said, "I don't want any money." I said, he's like, "But how can I help you? What can I do for you?" And I said, "Well, there's this thing." And I said, Ali Abdaal's first guest on Deep Dive, I don't know if you know this guy, Ben Francis, who founded Gymshark. You probably would imagine you've heard of Gymshark, but the Gymshark has been valued at like $4 billion recently. So it's a huge business now. But Ali's first guest was Gymshark. And I was like, Ben Francis. I was like, I'm no Ben Francis. Like, who am I to get onto this podcast, right? Again, imposter syndrome cropped up. But then I was like, no, do you know what? Again, he's human. I know Ali. I know the team. It's fine. So Joe says, well, look, I have to do something for you. What can I do for you? I said, well, I know Ali's recording 2 seasons of his podcast coming up, and then he's going traveling. And Ali does like 12 episodes a season back to back, like, so 24 episodes, interviews. People are flying in from all over the world. So there's a high chance somebody wouldn't show up. And I said, look, Joe, put me on the subs bench. Like, if one of them cancels or something like that, just mention to Amber, his booker, like, I'll step in at a moment's notice. Like, okay, I'll see what I can do. 2 days later, I get the call from Amber, who books Ali's guests. Robin, I've had somebody cancel on Tuesday. Can you come down? I was like, yeah, absolutely. Sign me up. Well, I wasn't as eager as that. I kind of played it quite cool, actually. In my head, I was thinking, yeah. And I was like, well, let me think about this now. Let me just check. Yeah, put it down. I'll let you know if I can't make it. And anyway, behind the scenes, I'm frantically like scrabbling because I had to do the school drop off in the morning and pick the girls up in the afternoon on the Tuesday. I had 2 podcast interviews. I had a coaching client. My wife's working away as well, so I had to get her to cancel everything. Funny story. You'll get to know that I like telling little anecdotes and stuff, right? I've done tons of interviews. I've done lots of speaking gigs, and things like that. And I kid you not, I traveled on the train down to London. I walk out of Paddington train station and a pigeon poops on me, right? What are the chances of that? And I've worked so hard for this opportunity. I'm all hair freshly cut, and I'm like all down my head, all that. People must have thought I was crazy because I walked out after that laughing and I never do this. I kid you not. I packed 5 spare shirts because this is how much this meant to me, this one interview. 5 spare shirts because we were filming it for YouTube. So I didn't know what the setup was going to be or colors, lighting, or that sort of thing. So I thought, I'll take a selection of shirts just in case. So I'm just laughing to myself because I'm like, what are the chances of this happening? But anyway, so that we recorded that in June. The episode eventually went live in August last year. And it went utterly bonkers. I've never experienced it. So, and this is also something, if anybody's listening to this and they want to learn about how to make the most out of a podcast interview. So I just led with value. I was like, we chose to do like a coaching role play. We picked 2 business ideas and it was just like a coaching session. It was brilliant. And then at the end of it, what we planned was we were going to do a prize draw for 15 books that Ali and I had jointly signed. When it went live in August, within 5 minutes, those 15 books were gone. And I was like, oh, crikey, what am I going to do now? But then the inquiries just kept rolling and rolling and rolling. So my thing is like, I give away physical copies of the book. That's part of my marketing. Rolling. And then I think in the first 90 days, I shipped something like 700 or 800 physical copies of the book to all 4 corners of the globe. Since in total now in the last year, I think I had 3,000 leads. Now we have to put this into context, right? I'd done all of the traditional forms of media that all of the experts tell you to do for years, right? 3,000 leads for me was about 4.5 years worth of effort prior to that to get in as in getting into my email list. So in 1-2 hour interview, chat, conversation, whatever, it created the same impact. And it absolutely blew my mind. And literally, I'm still getting inquiries coming through from it. And one of the amazing things was, and I think this is one of the key differentiators, if you can find a partner with a big audience, but specifically one that either does live events or YouTube, ideally, the amount of those people who, when we finally had a conversation and they would be like, oh my God, Robin, I can't believe I'm speaking to you. I'm like, I can't believe I'm speaking to you. But they'd sat through a 2.5 hour long interview. So they already felt like they knew me. So that's the power of like YouTube as well, especially in the podcasting arena. But in total, I think we've had well over 30 clients now join the Fearless Crew. That's my name for my collective name for my clients. And somewhere close to about $250,000 worth of business from those leads as well. And they're still joining. I've enrolled a client even this week, and that's from a year and a bit ago. So if you find the right partnership, like it's so powerful. And literally, I ditched all of the other forms of marketing. If you see me on social, it's because I get to do it. It's like, oh, I'm a bit bored now. I'll get out my camera and like make a video. Like I don't have to do it. And I think then it just frees you up. I'm not afraid of burnout anymore because, well, I don't have to do all of that marketing. I can just focus on coaching and having great conversations with people.
Oh, I love that. And like, do you have any tips on making data points or requirements if you're looking to kind of partner up maybe where their audience is or how large it is or what they should actually be looking for to know that this is going to be a fruitful partnership?
Yeah, so I broke it down into 4 tiers. I mean, I'll caveat this by saying you could do one deal that's worth $1 million, like if the right person is listening to the podcast on the right, at the right time. So there's no exact science for this. It just depends on kind of like what the numbers are within your own business. But for me, I essentially break podcasts down into like 4 tiers. So tier 1 is like your top tier, just almost like the celebrity status podcasters. Your Gary V's of the world, your Stephen Bartlett's Diary of a CEO, your Colin and Samir's. They've literally got millions of subscribers and this amazing like diehard fan base. That's the first tier. Second tier is what I call kind of they're kind of what class as like professional audiences. So they've managed to grow audiences that are probably like 100K up to 1 million subscribers or followers. Say they've actually kind of leveraged whatever their following is from a commercial perspective. They actually have monetized it quite well and are doing well. They're a little bit more accessible. They're less of that celebrity status, but they've still got their own diehard following. Tier 3s are more like your sort of, I don't know, 10,000, 20,000 to 100K sort of mark, where they're your expert authority figure. They're your coach, your creative consultant or freelancer who has a podcast that has, again, a reasonable following. Again, they're not really that not well known, but they've got that's still a reasonable sized audience. But more so what they're doing with their audience is to get clients for their business, if that makes sense. So the key differentiator between 2 and 3 is like tier 2s have like multiple revenue streams coming in, maybe large sort of mass participation courses and things like that. Whereas tier 3s tend to be much more like working more directly with their clients, so that they're looking to leverage their audience for clients. Tier 4s tend to be what I class as more like hobbyist. So a few hundred to a few thousand subscribers or followers. They're kind of using the podcast to leverage themselves up and to higher up the business social ladder, so to speak. And they might be using their podcast to try and get notable people onto their podcast to leverage their audience to lift them up. So that's roughly the sort of criteria I look at. And the thing is as well, you shouldn't be too precious over it, because I've had some great opportunities come out of like tier 3, tier 4 podcasts because of the relationships I built there. And a majority of things like podcasts, that's where you'll spend a lot of your time mostly, because the tier 1s are like unicorn podcasts. You may only do 1 or 2 of those a year. So my goal is literally, I'll see if I can get 1 or 2 of those, maybe 2 or 3 tier 2s, and then the rest is split between 3s and 4s, because it's good PR. It's great for like building relationships with brands and things like that. You find your friends in entrepreneurship, and like they're friends for life if you vibe with them.
I love that. That's really helpful. I appreciate that.
So another question I think a lot of people might have is maybe time commitment. Like how much if you're putting together a list of 10 people, you're trying to find their events, you're doing all this research, maybe you're checking out their businesses, see who else in their business you can get connected with. You're doing all these things. How much of a time commitment does that require in order to really develop this into something that's going to be fruitful within, 6 to 12 months? And is that going to take away from their normal business, activities that are currently generating revenue in their business?
Yeah, great question. So I can quantify this, because the old way, I was probably spending somewhere in the order of about 25 to 30 hours a week just on general marketing activities, so doing all of the usual stuff. Now, in terms of my partnerships, I probably invest about 3 to 4 hours a week, and that's it. And events take a little bit more. I've got one, for example, going down to London at the end of the month. Yeah, that's going to be best part of a day out, to get down there and back and things like that. So, but I also know the value of actually taking that time out that day to go and do that. But yeah, it's literally 3 to 4 hours a week. And the activities, a majority of the activities which I do there is like one simple, really tactical tip. When you find the people, you can follow them on LinkedIn and the various other socials. So LinkedIn and Twitter are the main 2 which I use. But there's this little bell icon. So when you follow somebody, you can hit the bell, and then whenever they post a piece of content, it appears in your notifications. So one of the things which I do, and it literally takes, once you've got it all set up in your list of 10 and you've turned the bell icon on, maybe 5 to 10 minutes a day, you just go and check LinkedIn, I go and check Twitter, and I just make sure everything that they put on there, I like it, comment it, I repost it, I share it with my audience, and I put a useful comment in there. And again, it's just that regular touch point that keeps you top of mind with these people. And Yeah, they probably get thousands of notifications a day, but if Robin Waite keeps on popping up in their feed, then they're going to slowly start to pay attention. So then when you start to pay more into that relationship, and maybe you do then show up at an event and like, oh my God, Robin, thank you so much for supporting all my content. I can't believe how much of that you've reposted. We really appreciate it. So you can get that acknowledgement. Yeah, as little as like 3 to 4 hours a week is plenty. And the second part of your question, would it be detrimental to getting clients in the short term? Yes, potentially. But I realized that for me, it's like typical Pareto principle. So let's say out of those 25, 30 hours that I was doing previously, 20% of the activities was doing were probably contributing towards 80% of the output. So again, I just got really focused on like trying to find the things which were working for me. So things which worked for me were broader podcast and like just doing podcast interviews, speaking engagements. And then I have a personal goal, which is to give away 3,000 copies of my book per year. So I just doubled down on those 3 activities alongside my partnership stuff. And lo and behold, they all feed into each other as well anyway. So it's kind of like quite a virtuous sort of cycle. It's hard because I did notice that the first 6 months before I got that interview with Ali, and I don't mind admitting this, I'm the fearless business coach, so a bit of radical candor here. I only enrolled 3 clients in the first 6 months of that year in the run up to that interview. Okay. Now, most people look at that and go, "Go, you're a successful business coach. You only enrolled 3 clients." The second stat, I interviewed 26 clients in that 6 months to bring them in as potential fearless crew members. And then again, people would look at that and go, "Oh God, that's a fearless business coach, successful business coach. That's a really poor sales conversion." I have like a process where I essentially interview clients before they join. It's not just about me taking money. It's like, are they best fit for my community? Are they going to get on? Can I get them great results? Do I actually love like this person and can see myself enjoying working with them? So the 23 people that didn't make it was mostly on my decision that they just weren't best fit. I'm very stubborn. I probably just have to admit that. I just stubbornly was like, I'm going to make these partnerships work come hell or high water. And lo and behold, they did. I've been in business for 20 years. And I think that sort of mindset is something which a lot of entrepreneurs actually lack these days, because they think, I set up a business, should be easy, make loads of money. It doesn't happen. And then they just give up after a few months. I just set a goal to stubbornly outlast all of my competition, like no matter what happened. So I knew these partnerships were going to work no matter what, essentially.
Yeah. No, I love all of that. And I can actually attest to it from, I don't want to say guru, because we're the anti-guru people, but from people who have followers, right? We have followers on a lot of different platforms, but there are people that I feel like I know because they comment on everything. I know, and I don't really know anything about them. I don't go on their stuff, but I see their names all the time. And I feel like I have a relationship with these people. I have no idea who they are, but if they were to come up to me and tell me their name at a live event, I'd be like, "Oh my goodness, you're such and such." That, oh wow, thank you. Like that, I've received that. And so I can understand you do pay attention. Even when you're getting a bunch of stuff and there's a lot of people, those names do stick with you because you're checking your comments, you're replying, you're doing the stuff. So I think that's a really good way to kind of wear them down.
Yeah, but wearing them down for the right reasons, I think, is because you support you, and or they're supporting you in this instance. Absolutely, yeah, love that.
Yeah,
I think another thing that people might struggle with, because one of the things you said was that you really want to try to find ways of adding value, kind of make yourself stand out. What kind of ideas could you help people come up with if they just are drawing a blank? Like they're like, I've got nothing to offer. I don't know what they would find valuable that they're not already getting, or if I do this, is it going to seem like really needy or desperate or just kind of weird and standoffish? Or I think a lot of people kind of struggle with finding that balance, but also finding something that's going to actually be something that makes them stand out in a good way.
Mm. So this is where you have to be just trust your like intuition, your gut instinct, and like just be a good human being. Most of the places where I found to be able to add value and be helpful is actually at the in-person events. And then when you're there, when you see somebody struggling with something, like, so Tomic on the event I'm speaking at, when Chris came over to keynote that last year, I could see that he didn't know where the green room was or anything like that. And actually, I hadn't met him in person before this either. We knew of one another through a mutual connection, but we hadn't met. So I saw him kind of just like walk into this auditorium with 500 plus people and like look lost. So I just went over to him and said, hey, Chris, look, we haven't met in person before. I'm Robin. You look lost. Are you looking for the green room? And he went, yeah, sure. And then I just took him up the stairs to where the green room was. And it so happened the event organizers were there anyway. So it worked. But that was just me just tuning into like trusting my intuition. And, you know, he could have just turned around and said, actually, no, I'm looking for the toilet or something. I could have still been helpful, you know, in that instance. So, or something as simple as like, again, you go to these events and quite often the speakers will be sat, like if there's a lunch or a dinner or something like that, a majority of people avoid sitting on the same table as them. Just go and sit next to them. Like a really awkward moment. I think it's okay to share this, but I won't name them, but there was a really great influencer on LinkedIn, and I was kind of a bit starstruck, and this was at the creator event. And I went and sat on the table with him. I thought it was a great opportunity to try and have a conversation with the guy, you know, and it was a small sort of event. Then one of the other speakers sat on the table, then another speaker sat on the table. And these guys were just having like a bro love, and it was just like, they were just like chatting between the three of them, and kind of the rest of us felt a little bit left out. And I tried to interject in the conversation. But again, that's one of those things that, well, those guys will just go about their day, probably like they'll forget about it. There's probably more I could have done to make myself more memorable, but I think if I tried to force myself like on them, not physically, but you know, that would have been too much, and they would have remembered me for the wrong reason. So again, it's about like finding that balance of like trust your intuition, just try and find a creative way to be helpful and not overstep. I think that's quite important to say as well.
Well, this has been an amazing conversation, Robin. I love what you're doing, and I think it resonates probably a lot with our audience who might be a little burnt out on all of their crazy stuff that they're working on and could see the value on playing the long game and creating these sort of relationships and partnerships. So we really appreciate you, Robin. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You're welcome. If people want to check you out, where should they head?
So I'm trying to grow my YouTube channel at the moment. So if you jump onto YouTube, search for Robin Waite with an E on the end of it, hopefully they'll find me there. And then also I have prepared a gift for everybody as well. I've mentioned it a couple of times actually. So my book, Take Your Shot, which is a story about one of my first clients, I've got free signed copies for all of your listeners, viewers as well. So they can get that at fearless.biz/TYS.
And we'll have the links to that in the show notes and description. Thank you so much, Robin.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Digital Trailblazer podcast. For show notes and information about today's guest, head to digitaltrailblazer.com. Now, if you love this episode, if you got some value, make sure you leave us a review and subscribe. And be sure to share this episode with anyone you know who could use help to build their business. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.